If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon, so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. I posted a video about 6 years ago about Iran, about the people and their history vis-a-vis the United States, and I guess it must have tripped the algorithm for a number of my subscribers because a lot of people started to suddenly rediscover this video. That video was about something that's actually very pertinent to the war going on in Iran today, and that's about how in Iran, the code was the leader for them, not just any individual, not even the Ayatollah Khomeini. But that wasn't the only video I posted. I posted one just last year because there were strikes going on during the summer. Trump was basically trying to show the people from AIPAC and those Zionist donors of his like Miriam Adelson that they were getting their money's worth. But I was telling people then that that was not going to be World War III, though you had a ton of people who said, this is it, we're going to be eating our babies for breakfast, the nukes will be falling any moment now. Well, we're still here. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is this. Regime change hasn't really worked when the U.S. does it. It destabilizes places long enough for American multinational corporations to get their hooks in, which seems to be the real goal. But as far as making these places bastions of democracy or making it where they're no longer hostile to the United States, it doesn't do that. Sure, you can go ahead and break their backs economically and you can bomb their military infrastructure to rubble, but that only works until the troops leave. It certainly won't work in a country like Iran because the U.S. overthrew their government at least once and installed the Shah as dictator. And the Israelis are hated by the Iranians because the Israelis trained the Shah's brutal secret police force, a death squad known as the Savak. There was a reason why when the U.S. embassy was taken hostage, you didn't see the Iranians crying any tears for them. It's because for decades, the U.S. and the Israelis had made sure to put in place a brutal regime in Iran that repressed the people, brutalized them into submission, and then you had the same Americans and Israelis talking about how great things were in Iran, celebrating the Shah, talking about him as just being this great leader of the country, and totally ignoring the fact that he was brutalizing his own people, and the US and the Israelis were the ones who were funding and training him how to do it. Most of your white media isn't telling you about this, but that's why you listen to the black media. There are divisions within Iran, certainly. As there are with every country, including the United States. The reality is, though, the people aren't fooled. They don't look at the U.S. or Israel as liberators or allies. Sure, you got some elements inside of Iran who would love to be running the place and they don't have the power to overthrow the ruling party. But that doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of people in Iran, they're not trying to be under the U.S. flag and they do not see Israel as their friends. They know that America is coming to get Iran's oil, and the Israelis want Iran to be powerless and defenseless so Netanyahu and his buddies can control and exploit the entire region and its people with no opposition whatsoever. This is all about making sure that they can just trample over the people there and that there's no consequences for it. In the meanwhile, there's been a lot of confusion, much of it willful, by a lot of people, not just in white society, but a lot of black folks too, who listen to too many pork chop preachers. They seem to think to themselves that Israel's the good guys simply because they had a pastor who said in the Old Testament thus and so. All the movies and TV shows that we've seen depicting Iran as being a crazy theocracy hell-bent on getting nukes, all that propaganda was made up by the Israelis. This is not to say that Iran is some bastion of hope and power for black people. They're not. But what I'm saying is a lot of the stuff that you've been seeing about the world, most of it in fact brought to you by the white media, is propaganda. Next time that you watch things like, say, Delta Force or Homeland, why don't you try looking to see who are the people who make that stuff? We'll get to that in a moment, though, because that is relevant to this evening's address. But the primary reason that we're talking about this subject is you got a lot of people from the United States who are trapped in Dubai, including a lot of black people. Now, the very first question that comes to my mind is, what is any black person doing in Dubai? Well, we can all guess that one. They had illusions about where they were and the situation there. And that's what this evening address is about, illusions. The people who make them up and the people who believe them. You actually got some folks over there who simply cannot believe that the authorities in Dubai are basically telling them, hey, now that a war's broken out, if you want to be staying here in the hotel, with all of the aircraft grounded, well, you're going to need to pay top dollar for accommodations or you can get out. And what's interesting to me is all the people who were styling and profiling, taking pictures of themselves in front of the Burj Khalifa, what have you, all of these people who basically were trying to perpetrate as if they were part of the jet set out there in Dubai, These are the same folks who are now begging folks, can you please send me some money so I can get out of here? Amazing how overnight the very people who basically were trying to perpetrate as if they were doing it big, as if they had all of this money because they're in Dubai, though that doesn't really mean anything other than you spent too much on a plane ticket. Those exact same people are now saying, please send help. And keep in mind, the main thing that they're concerned about, aside from the missiles that have been raining down on them from Iran, happens to be the fact that they can't afford to stay. Africans in particular are upset about how the Arabs in Dubai are treating them, but that amazes me doubly so because Dubai is infamous for how it treats foreign laborers, specifically the ones from Africa. They bring in the world's poorest people, take their passports away, then work them like slaves, and in many cases don't even pay them. And now you got the relatives and the in-laws of those exact same horribly exploited Africans who can't believe that the same Arabs who exploited their people now don't give a damn about them in the middle of a war zone either. They simply refuse to understand that where black people are concerned, this isn't really all about the money. Hush Puppy, the former scammer and now current federal inmate, took up residence in Dubai because they don't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. He simply didn't realize that just because a country doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S., that doesn't mean that you cannot be extradited. It simply means that there's no legal obligation to extradite you, that they can send your behind if they choose to. They just don't have to do it. And after all, Hush Puppy thought, there's so many Arabs in Dubai who the U.S. would love to get its hands on, but they've been able to successfully take up refuge in Dubai, and the government there hasn't handed them over, so surely it wouldn't do that to him. And in the end, surely they did. Some people are just slow. I know why people go to Dubai. Because it's known for having the world's richest people who go there, and that country's done a masterful job of marketing themselves, mostly by paying big-name celebrities to go there and do events for them. Everything from pro sports to concerts to movies. Dubai wants the world to know that they're different than the rest of the Middle East, and they're open for business. And if you're willing to overlook the literal modern-day slavery and the sex trafficking and the blatant in-your-face racism, then sure, you too can take a couple of selfies in front of the Burj Khalifa or in front of some sheikh's super yacht or sitting there finding some obscure celebrity that you might happen to see on the strip there. And you too can go ahead and post that online and say, see, I went to Dubai, I'm a somebody. Black folks keep going to these places and thinking that because you spend some tourist money, that means that they like you. And now these same people are shocked. Why? For the same reason you got so many black folks, especially the boomers in the United States, who are sitting there saying those Iranians need to stop messing with those Israelis. These is peoples of the book. Young and middle-aged black people getting themselves cornered in a war zone in the Middle East. And old heads in the United States who apparently are thinking to themselves that it's still the 1980s or something. How did they get to this point? How did so much confusion come to take root in the black community? Well, a large part of it was honestly the middle-aged and younger black folks. They watched too many videos on the internet and they read too many travel brochures and watched too many TV shows and music videos about Dubai. And the older black folks, they watched entirely too much television and movies. During the 1980s, there was an absolute orgy of movies showing big bad Arabs and content on TV reinforcing the same. And most of it came from action movies put out by Golem Globus, who owned Canon Films. Now, if you're a Gen Xer or a very early millennial, you probably remember Canon Films because so much of their content was on cable television. Golem Globus became a name that a lot of people were familiar with. But who or what was Golem Globus? It was two Israelis, Menachem Golan and his production partner Yoram Globus. They put out all kinds of flicks that were basically propaganda straight from the Mossad since at least the 1960s. But it was in the 1970s that Golem Globus became more brazen and straightforward with it. In 1977, Golem Globus made Operation Thunderbolt, which was about the real-life hijacking of a French airliner that was taken over by gunmen who then forced the plane to fly to Uganda. There were Israelis aboard who the gunmen were holding hostage in exchange for the release of Arabs who the Israelis were holding prisoner. That incident's important because Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, Yoni Netanyahu, was one of the commandos the Israelis sent to rescue the hostages. He died during that operation, and Benjamin Netanyahu has made sure to mention his brother's death every chance he's gotten for the last 50 years. Oh, and on a side note, who was the leader of Uganda in the 1970s when this incident occurred? Idi Amin, who, by the way, was not a big fan of Israel, probably because the Israelis supported white supremacists like the apartheid regime in South Africa. Most people don't actually know anything about Idi Amin other than what the white media has said about him. Well, it's no coincidence that Hollywood in particular demonized him morning, noon, and night even after he died. I was the very first person who ever challenged the white media narratives about certain African leaders, such as my classic video, The Truth About Robert Mugabe. White power loved Mugabe up until the moment he started talking back. And I also encourage you to think for yourself when it comes to Idi Amin. So it was two Israelis who started banging the drum against Idi Amin in the movies. Golem Globus also produced movies like Death Wish 2 and 3, the sequels to what was the quintessential white vigilante glorification flick. Movies like Death Wish were basically made as a backlash to the civil rights movement and whatever gains came out of the Black Power movement of the 70s. It was all about glorifying white anger and angst and justifying any racists out there who had fantasies of gunning down black people just because. Movies like that encouraged white people to go out and gun down unarmed black people, especially black youth. We saw this play out in real life with people like Bernie Goetz, among others. And through Canon Films, Golem Globus also put out The Delta Force, a Chuck Norris flick that was nothing more than an American remake of Operation Thunderbolt from 9 years earlier. It even had the exact same plot. An airliner was hijacked by Arabs, flies and lands in a foreign country, and commandos are sent in to carry out the rescue. They don't make these movies for the sake of entertainment. As I've told you for 20 years, the white media is not in the business of entertainment. They're in the business of mind control. And that's why they recycle the propaganda every few years as a way to control the public mind. And there's plenty of other Israelis who have been in Hollywood pushing Mossad propaganda, such as Gideon Raff. He created a TV show in his native Israel about Israeli soldiers taken prisoner by Muslim extremists. Several years later, these soldiers are finally rescued, but one of them has converted to Islam, and as a result, he's now a sleeper agent for the jihadis. In Israel, they called this show Prisoners of War. After 9/11, Showtime executives licensed the idea from the Israelis so that they could make their own version of the show for the U.S. Gideon Raff came to Hollywood to be the executive producer for the show, which they called Homeland. And what was the major storyline of that show? Iran is the world's biggest threat and the source of all evil in the world. Never mind that Iran has never had anything to do with any act of terrorism in the U.S. Iran is Israel's enemy, not America's. But the biggest success of the Israeli government's propaganda has been to get Americans to actually think we got a dog in that fight. But by far, the biggest Israeli agent in Hollywood has to be Arnon Milchan. I did an entire video about him years ago. Milchan has been a permanent fixture of Hollywood for over 50 years. He has credits so long it would take you till 3 in the morning just to list half of them. But before he went to Tinseltown, he was an agent of the Israeli government who, among other things, was instrumental in helping Israel to arm the apartheid regime in South Africa, and he also helped to push apartheid propaganda by helping the Dutch Afrikaner government to buy newspapers. This man became a billionaire in Hollywood, by the way. And not only that, but Milchan had other people in Hollywood who also helped with his arms deals, such as director and producer Sidney Pollack, who Milchan said helped in covert acquisitions of arms and sensitive military equipment for Israel. Sidney Pollack, by the way, if you don't know, directed a lot of well-known movies such as 3 Days of the Condor, The Way We Were, Tootsie, The Firm, Sabrina, The Interpreter, among many other films. And he was helping to run weapons for the Israelis. Gee, when you learn stuff like this, it really puts things like Jonathan Majors into proper perspective now, doesn't it? Now, we're not doing this little stroll down memory lane because I care what movies you like. Most of you know that I have nothing but contempt for the crap that comes out of Hollywood. Some of you needed the BAFTAs to teach you how much hatred the white media has for black people, and as a result, a lot of you have sworn off watching anything from the BBC as a result of that, and all I can say to you is, hell, I was never watching to begin with. I'm one of those people who it matters to me who makes the so-called news and entertainment the white media puts in front of me. My own disconnection from these TV shows and movies began in the late 1980s when I began to take a critical look at how black people have been portrayed in the white media. All of the phony inclusion that they had on TV didn't take the bad taste out of my mouth about how black people were being portrayed, and I wasn't willing to overlook or excuse this disrespect, and I began to wonder what kinds of people were making this racialist crap, because they always seemed to feel the need to just insert that stuff no matter what. Even as a child, you would notice this. So I began looking at the names at the beginning and ends of these TV shows and movies, and pretty soon I began to make connections. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, somebody wants this out there. And it didn't take long to figure out who. And something else Dr. Clarke said, If you can control what people see, then you can control how people see themselves. And to that, I would add, you can also control how people see the world. So a lot of people bought into Hollywood's illusions for decades. But illusions become a lot less attractive when people don't have any money for movies or cable subscriptions or streaming services. And when there's a cost of living crisis, people start paying more attention to whether a war abroad will cause financial problems at home. And they start being more discerning about who may be causing these problems. And if they see a connection between the myth makers and illusion creators from Hollywood and the wars and financial problems they face, then it will become a lot harder to make them fall for the same-o in the future. Well, at least as far as their entertainment goes anyway. Now, this matters because the people in the Middle East knew about this decades ago. While Americans were getting a kick out of Chuck Norris's latest flick, pun intended, the people in the Middle East dismissed that kind of stuff as nothing more than basically Israeli propaganda. Most Americans didn't understand why they would use that word Israeli to describe it. But when you start looking at the names who are producing these films, you start saying, wait a minute, these are Israelis. Naturally, you're not going to find any black celebrities in the US talking about it because most of them are hoping to get a deal with some white media company. And before it's all over, they wind up signing a deal with people like Arnon Milchan or going to work for the Golem Globuses of the world. And then the money that they put out at the box office or that they pay to buy some sort of DVD winds up funding the Trump campaign, and then you got those same people saying, oh, and by the way, we need some bombs to fall on Tehran. And that's how you get people over there finding out that the U.S. government isn't going to bail them out. Not unless they're a Fortune 500 company. Some people are blaming the people who are stranded over there and saying, well, it's your own fault. You should have known what was brewing, etc., etc. I'm actually of the mind that it's one thing to know that the U.S. plans to bomb a nearby country. This happened with Venezuela too, but nobody in Brazil, Colombia, or Peru was rushing for the airports just because the U.S. went ransacking that place either. Dubai didn't become a war zone because it's the site of any battles. It became a target because Iran is punishing the countries that it sees as being collaborators with the Americans and the Israelis, and it's threatening the Strait of Hormuz, which is the central artery of global trade. Many historians and political scientists and even politicians have said in the past that one of the main flashpoints for a possible Third World War would be the Strait of Hormuz, since everyone depends on it and since every major nuclear power has a presence in the area. Look, I'm fine with people taking a vacation. What I'm not fine with is black people who keep going into other people's lands and expecting them to behave hospitably and courteous towards black people just because they're tourists. Black people's enemies came from Asia long before they started coming from Europe. And hopefully this will be a good reminder for a lot of black folks who seem to have very short memories. The question isn't why are these people stranded in Dubai? The real question is why did they think that a country on the other side of the world with no history of being kind towards black people would treat them any differently than the US government, which also has no history of being kind toward black people? Hell, even the white folks are complaining that the orange man isn't getting them out of there. And I don't know if there's any travel insurance that covers an outbreak of war. It's amazing, though. People trying to party in the middle of a minefield. Well, party's over. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Andre Evans, Leonard Cottingham, Cowie Harvard, James Hampton, and Lorena Peters. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.